Hi, I'm Tom Hinkle, and in this session, we're going to delve into an underutilized feature of Excel, conditional formatting. Now, for those who are familiar with it, conditional formatting is a method of applying formatting to cells based on their values. It's usually employed for simple coloring of individual cells, but today, in addition to providing an overview of the basics, we're going to explore some more advanced ways to use conditional formatting, such as utilizing a formula-based conditional formatting to elevate the functionality of a working list or report, integrating a checkbox for toggling conditional formatting rules on and off, applying conditional formatting to a pivot table, and then finally, implementing dynamic thresholding to transform a pivot table into a way more powerful analytics tool. So I hope you're going to enjoy the session, and hopefully by the end of the day, you'll have a brand new tool to add to your Excel toolbox. So to get started, we're just going to do a little review / learn how to do the basics of conditional formatting on a data set that we have here on the Basics tab. Now what this is, it's a group of 10 or so companies, and we've got bill rates per hour for clients. So in the first two columns, we want to just set a color. And on the third one, we want to do data bar, then we want color scales, and finally icon sets. So what we can do here is if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see that we've created this table below so that you can actually do the work alongside, but you can go back up to reference what we're trying to do. So we want to go ahead and get started, and the easiest way to get started with conditional formatting is just to highlight the cells you want to apply it to. Then we'll go to our conditional formatting button, click that, and the first choice there is highlight cells rules. These are the most basic ones. We're going to click on, we want to highlight things that are greater than a certain value. So we'll just click on that. And Excel pops up a little dialog box, and it's just guessing that you want to format cells that are greater than 112. What's really greater than 100 is what we want. And instead of a light red fill with dark red text, we want it to be green because we want to format those cells that are above 100 in a bill rate. That's a good thing. Now we want to do the low ones too. Since those cells are still highlighted, let's just go back to conditional formatting, highlight cells rules where they're less than a value. Again, it shows 112, so let's just change that to 100. And now we'll keep the light red fill with dark red text and click OK. Well, that's pretty good. It highlighted almost everything, but we left off 100. Now this is where you have to be conscious of how you're applying your rules. We wrote the green rule to be everything over 100 or greater than 100. And then we wrote the red rule for values less than 100, but we forgot to include 100. So we're going to go down to Manage Rules, which we're going to spend a lot of time in today. And it shows us the rules that we built in the last couple of minutes. We've got the red rule that shows that it's only highlighting things under 100. And then the green rule is only showing things greater than 100. Well, we want to modify that to include 100 as green. So we'll go to Edit Rule. And then down here, it's setting the rule where the cell value is greater than 100. We want to say greater than or equal to 100 and click OK. Now to apply that, to see it, you actually have to click the Apply button, and then it'll apply and include that 100. Okay, so now that we've fixed that, now we want to extend that rule over to column C and all the way down to row 39. So we can go over to the Applies To section, and this shows you what cells in your worksheet it's applying that rule to. And what we can do is click that range selector over to the right. Then we can just highlight the range we want it to apply to, and it'll fill in right there. And we'll go ahead and bring it back. Now that red rule is updated, we can update the green too. Instead of clicking the Applies To, we can just go over and highlight the range. So it's even easier. Once you've reset those ranges, just click Apply, and it carries that rule over to both columns. So this is how you can take your rule you've already built and extend it to more cells. Now what we want to do is look at data bars. These are kind of a little mini graph inside of a cell. So this time to access data bars, we're going to highlight the cells, but if you look on the lower right, we got a little quick access button that has a lot of formatting options. And if you go down, it starts off with data bars, color scales, icon sets, and then some of the basic rules again, the greater than, percentage. We'll just click data bars and put those right in there. Really, really easy. And it looks great, except for there's a couple issues here too. One is the data bars overlap the numbers. It's kind of difficult to read, and it just doesn't look very good. So we're going to go back to conditional formatting, our manage rules dialog box. So from there, we've got the data bar rule, and we could click edit rule, but you can also just double click a rule and that will bring up the formatting rule dialog box. Now we've got some different option here because it's a data bar. We can set the minimums and maximums, but we also have a checkbox for show bar only. Let's go ahead and click on that, and then we'll go see what that does. We'll click OK and then click OK again, and you see that the numbers went away. Now if you click in those cells and look at the formula bar, the number's still there, the value's still there. We've just hidden it so our data bar can be clean in that cell all by itself. Let's look at another way to modify a data bar that can be a little bit better too. If you want to keep those numbers, we can keep that checkbox off, but then we can change the scales. By default, Excel is going to make the biggest data bar go fill in the entire cell, but we can change that. We can change the minimum and maximum for the data bar. So here, let's change the minimum. We want to make it a number, and we're going to keep that number at 0 for the minimum. For the maximum though, I think our max value is 180. Let's go ahead and make it 240, and then click OK and see what happens there. And we'll go click our apply button. And that's another really good look for the data bar. What we did is we moved the max over so that it didn't take up the whole cell and made enough room for all the numbers to appear on the right. So this looks much better than the first option where we had the data bars overlapping the numbers and you couldn't really tell what they were. Now I'm going to go ahead and quickly go back and just reset those to just showing the bar only and putting the minimums and maximums back, because that's kind of what I like, and I think that's what I want to keep it at. So click OK and click apply. Now that we're back here on the rules, I want to show one other thing. Right now we're only seeing the rule for the data bar, but just a couple of minutes ago we made two other rules to make cells green or red, but we don't see them. Right now the manager's only looking at formatting that applies to the current selection. So if you click this drop down, you see we've got so many more choices to see all the rules on different sheets or tables or areas in our workbook. We can click on this worksheet and see all of the conditional formatting rules on this worksheet. That brings them all up. We see what every rule is applied to. We see what the rules are. And here's where we can see everything on our worksheet. It's a little much though, so we want to go back to current selection. Again, that's only going to show you the rules based on the cell you're selected. Now let's move on and do color scales. So for this one, we're going to highlight the whole range again, go to our conditional formatting, and choose color scales. And this is kind of similar to the first rule, but we get different ranges of colors. So here you see we've got color scales that highlight the top values in green and the bottom values in red. But this time, there's different intensities of green and red. So it's really easy to distinguish the highest performer or the best bill rate or the lowest bill rate. So we can call attention to it right away. It's just another way to look at a big range of data. Sometimes this is also called a heat map and can be used effectively with big groups of data. So now let's go over to icon sets, and we want to put some icons on these cells to really draw people's attention to values that we specify. So let's highlight the cells and go down to icon sets, and you see all the icon sets available. We're going to choose a standard green, yellow, red icon, and that's pretty good. It put greens on some high values and reds on some lowers, and yellow for everything in between. But there's a couple problems. With the number there, it's kind of tough to see the icon, and there's a lot of icons. So let's go back up to our manage rules and see what we can change there. Let's modify our icon set rule after moving this over. We'll edit the rule. The first thing we want to do is just show the icon only. Then let's look at how Excel structures this rule. Down here we've got our icons, green, yellow, and red. And then it's saying when the value is greater than or equal to 67%, green. When it's between 67 and 33, make it yellow, and under 33 is red. Excel's just picked the defaults and then split these values up into thirds. So now instead of being so broad, we might want to change those values to just see the top 10 and bottom 10% of our values. So draw our attention right to it. So what we can do here is in green, we want to say when the value is greater than 90%, so the top 10%, we want it to be green. Then for red, we want it to be under 10%. So let's go ahead and click apply. That looks way better. Look at that. The numbers are gone. The icons stand out. The red and the green really kind of stand out, but we don't really need the yellow. Those aren't adding any value to our visual. So let's see if we can get rid of the yellow to just show the icons for green and red. So we'll go back and edit our rule. And now if you look down here, if we click this little arrow next to the icon, you'll see all the different choices we can have to put in those icons. Now for the next section, we're going to look at how to apply a formula-based rule to a sheet. And what we have on our formula inventory control sheet is an inventory list that has some cues to people to work with it. So if the row is gray, that means the product's discontinued. If it's blue, that means we need to reorder. And also on that reorder, we're putting a flag in column B just to be that extra indicator to show us we're doing a reorder. But the first thing we need to do that we haven't talked about yet is clear the existing conditional formatting rules from this table. So the easiest way is just to highlight the table. So we'll scroll down a little bit, highlight this entire table. And then from our conditional formatting button, we'll go down to clear rules and we'll clear from selected cells. That wiped out all the rules. So now we're going to first start with our discontinued rule. And we'll go up to L7. And what we're going to do here is we've got to drop down for yes or no values. So if it's yes, we want it shaded. Now we'll go to conditional formatting, manage rules, and we're going to build this from scratch. So when we click manage rules, we're going to make a new rule, and then we're going to go down to use a formula to tell which cells are true. Now this is going to work pretty much like an Excel formula, except for you have to have a condition where it's true or false. So we're going to say equals here, and then we're going to click on L7 to put that value in the formula for starters. Now, Excel put it in as an absolute reference. That means it's only going to check L7. As we copy this to our table, we want the row to change, but we want it to always be checking what's in column L for discontinued. So we need to take the $ off the column reference, or the 7, to make that work. So let's do that. Let's take the $ off. And now let's say when it's equal to the value of yes, we want to apply some formatting. So that's our formula. Now go down and click that format button, and it'll pull up all the choices we have to format. We're going to stick with the fill and just make that gray and click OK. And we click OK again. And then we look at this and we can go hit apply. That didn't do anything, but it's because the value we wrote the formula on has a no. So let's change our applies to make this rule apply to the entire table. So we'll go click on our applies to box, and then we'll set that range again to be the entire table. So just by highlighting it, drag it down, and click apply. And see, that formula worked now. Everywhere there's a yes in column L, it's checking on every column in that table. And if there's a yes in column L, then the whole row is going to be shaded gray. And you see how the toggles work? You can just toggle on and off. It's great. Well, the next thing we want to do is do our reorder, where we want to shade that row blue and put that flag in column B. One thing to notice, instead of yes or no in column B, is we have ones and zeros. That's okay. Let's go to conditional formatting, manage rules. At this time, we're going to do it a little different. We're going to duplicate this rule because it's so similar to what we want to do. So we'll go up here and hit duplicate, and then we can edit that rule, and we need to change the formula and the format. So instead of checking L7, we're going to check B7, and instead of being yes or no, it's going to be 1 or 0. So we'll just say if B7 is equal to 1, then we want to shade the row. So we'll go down and hit our format button, and we'll shade it in that light blue color that we saw earlier. Click OK. OK again and apply. So now you see it worked great. We got the blue for a reorder and gray if it's discontinued. What if it's both of those? Well, let's go ahead and click OK and see what happens if we toggle discontinued on a reorder row. The the discontinued kind of overtakes the blue, and that's because it's the last rule. Well, now let's go ahead and put our flags on. So let's go ahead and click on B7 and go to conditional formatting, and we're going to choose an icon set. And we'll go down to the flags. And then we want to modify that rule. Put a green flag up there. We got to do a couple little things to it. So we're going to go up here, edit rule, and modify that rule. The first thing we want to do is change the order of the flag. So red is first. So we'll click this reverse icon order. Then we want it to be red if the value or the number is 1. So we'll just have to do a greater than or equal to 1. Then for the next two, we can just put a 0 there for a number for yellow and green. But it doesn't matter because we're going to not show icons for yellow and green anyway. We're going to go back and click that arrow and see no cell icon and no cell icon for green. So now when we click OK, and now we have to reset the applies to range just to be column B all the way to the bottom. And we'll click apply and OK. And it looks pretty good. We got the red flag on every one of our reorder rows, but we forgot to remove the number. So let's go back to conditional formatting, manage the rules, and we'll go ahead and show icon only for that red flag. Click OK and apply. And there you have it, formula-based rules to do some shading and put some indicators on an inventory list that can be pretty helpful for people working on it. Now onto the holiday tab. We just have a fun little exercise here where we put some conditional formatting on some numbers, and as you can see in a minute, we're going to have a picture up there. But we also wanted to show how to use a checkbox to toggle conditional formatting on and off. And that can be really useful when you're trying to develop something or you want to get all the effects you put off of the spreadsheet for a few minutes so you can like debug things and then turn it back on. So first thing we'll do is just click that checkbox. And you see we've got a little picture of a Christmas tree with some presents underneath it. I just have these colors over here for reference, just in case anybody's wondering. I'd actually draw this cell by cell first and then convert the colors back to numbers. So it didn't take as long as you'd think. Well, let's go ahead and look at this rule a little bit. The first thing we're going to do is go to click in our picture box here and go to conditional formatting, manage rules. And it's very simple. There's like 7 rules that tell it what color I want to put on that grid. And then this top rule is the checkbox toggling so I can turn it on and off. And what happens is when it's false, it'll basically just default to being like regular text with a white background. So let's click OK and let's talk about the checkbox for a second. It's a new tool in Excel and it's on the insert menu about 3/4 of the way down. We've got a checkbox right before a text box. And so how that works is you just go to a cell, put a checkbox on it, and now you can just toggle it, have a checkbox or not. But you see the formula bar behind me. When it's checked, it has a value of true. When it's not, it has a value of false. So what we did is simply add that checkbox, and then we made a rule in conditional formatting at the very beginning that said if the formula is not true, meaning it's false, we don't want to show any of the colors. If it's false, then the format should be the white background with all the text here in black. If it's true, then it'll go down and it'll replace every number with this shaded cell, if you will. Click OK. So we'll just click that on and off. And that's all there is to it. Okay, well in this section, what we're going to do is we're going to combine conditional formatting with one of Excel's best analytic tools, and that's the pivot table. That table by itself is fantastic, but now we're going to add a graphic element to that pivot and really make it great for analysis. So we've got an example here what we're going to build, but the first thing we need to do is actually take the conditional formatting off of this table. So we'll click anywhere in the table, in the pivot table, and then let's go back up to our conditional formatting button, and we're going to go down to clear rules, and you see you have an option here at the bottom to clear from this pivot table. So we'll do that. And now to create a rule, it's really simple. What we want to do is click on one of the cells in the value area. It doesn't matter which one. And then we're going to go to conditional formatting, pick whatever rule you want. We're going to do data bars. And when you click on that data bar, a little option is going to appear in the lower right. And if you click on that, it's going to show you, hey, right now conditional formatting is applying to the selected cell, but I could also apply it to this value field, the revenue value field, or value field based on location and items. We'll check that one out later. For now, let's just pick the value field. That's it. You put the data bars right on the pivot table, and whatever you do to them, whatever you do to the pivot table, the conditional formatting is going to respond to it. Now this looks really good, but there's still some things to fix. So let's go to our manage rules and see if we can make changes. Just like any other conditional formatting rule, we can change things here. I'm going to change the color of the bar, and then I'm going to just show bars only to get the numbers out of there, and click OK. And you see, the modification's just like any other conditional formatting rule. Now, it doesn't look awesome without the numbers, because in pivot tables, you're really used to seeing the numbers. So we'll work with that in a minute. But the first thing I want to show you is we've got different fields here. Let's see how it reacts as we move some fields around. See, we moved the items over, and the conditional formatting just responds to whatever shape you put that pivot table in, and whatever combination of dimensions and values that you have. So you can already see this is a really good tool. We can see really quickly what the high performers are and low performers are, and it's going to be good. So we'll put it back to how it was normally. And now let's go back to conditional formatting, manage rules, and edit the rule. And I'm going to put the numbers back on, but the other thing I want to do is talk about the other value option. You see at the top of this manage rule screen is we have the different options. So the third option we're going to look at is showing the total revenue by location and item. Now what Excel is doing is actually looking at the highest level dimensions on our pivot table for the X and Y axis. So on the top, it's items, and in the rows, it's location. So let's click that option and see what it does when we click OK. And click OK again, and where'd it go? All my data bars are gone. Well, since we said we only want to see it when you're looking at location and item, we've got dates in here too. That's why the data bars went away. Watch what happens when we roll up one of the locations. Now that's just location, it'll show the data bar. So that's kind of that third option that takes the highest dimensions. It's a little tricky to work with, so I always recommend just going off of the actual value field, and that'll be the second option up there. And then that's going to be the easiest way to attach conditional formatting to your pivot table. So we'll set that back and click OK. And now what we want to do is we want to have a better way to look at those data bars. And if you go to the next tab, the double measure pivot, this looks really good. We've got the values there, and the data bar is to the right of those values. It's right there. It looks like it belongs to that number. You see the visual right away, and it doesn't overlap at all. So this is what we want to build in this example, and I got to show you a pivot table trick to do that. So first thing we're going to do is go over here to the values. We've got total revenue, and then the one below, the pill below, has just an ellipsis or dot, dot, dot. Let's drag that out of the value section and get rid of it. So what we've got to do here is we've got to add another revenue value field. So it's pretty easy to do. Let's go back over to our pivot table fields, drag revenue down, and it makes another field, sum of revenue, and let's go to the value field settings there. We're going to rename that one, and we're going to name it dot, 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 because it's the same values as total revenue, but we're going to show a data bar in there. So we click OK, and now we've got it. We've duplicated that item in the pivot table, but it's its own field. So I'm going to click on one of the values in the dot, dot, dot field to make our new pivot. And we'll go to conditional formatting and go down to do data bars and click the data bars. And go down and select that we want it to be tied to the second option, the values, the dot, dot, dot values, and there you have it. It's next to it. The only thing we have left to do now is to go back in and show bar only on that second value field, and that's how we make a really, really sharp pivot table with conditional formatting with data bars. So a couple other things I did earlier is I narrowed the columns that the data bars are going to be in so they don't take up as much space. So it still is a good cue, but it's not overwhelming the pivot table. And that's really what you want to do. You want to have good analysis that's really helpful for people to look at and draws their attention really quickly. Now this topic is one of my favorites, and I call it dynamic thresholding. And you're going to see this is just going to be an amazing helper for analytics. So let's look at the finished product first. We've got a pivot table here. Again, it's our bakery pivot table. We've got it by days, then location, and then we've got items over here across the top. And we've got indicators here that show good days and bad days. But there's a lot of good days and there's a lot of red days. Maybe we want to tune that up a little bit. So what dynamic thresholding is that we can actually change the values with a cell on our sheet and have the conditional formatting respond to that. So now maybe I want to only see things that have sales over 800 every day. I just type that value in and the pivot table, the conditional formatting on the pivot changes, maybe 1,000. What if I want to show a few less bad values too, maybe everything under 30? So this is a really powerful tool for analytics when you're trying to really figure out the trends and find some patterns in the data. Dynamic thresholding is a really powerful tool. So let's go ahead and see how we build that out. All right, so I'm going to leave these cells here. This is where we're going to type in our values of what's going to be red and what's going to be green. But we're going to start this almost from scratch. We're going to leave the extra field in there. If you remember, this was just an extra revenue field that we tied conditional formatting to, but we're going to clear that out and build the formatting again. So I'm going to go conditional formatting, clear rules from the pivot table. So again, as you see, we've got the extra revenue field to show the values twice. And what we want to do is attach icon sets to that. So I'll click somewhere under the ellipsis extra field in the values, and I'll go to conditional formatting, go to an icon set, and we're going to do red, yellow, green again. And we'll expand this out to be the entire pivot table. And you see, this is pretty horrible. Even though this is, showing all the reds, yellows, and greens, it doesn't help at all because there's too many indicators. So let's clean this up a little bit and show how to tie it to these numbers up here. Conditional formatting, we'll go to manage rules. First thing we're going to do is just show the icon only. And I'll apply that. Okay, that's a little better. Now what we have to do is set up the rules a little bit different. Now right now we've got green when it's over 67%. Again, we're working with the percentage values. We want to go to actual numbers. So now what we want to do is green when the value is greater than or equal to 67%. Let's say a number. Now we can type a number in here, but what we're going to do instead, we got the range selector here, is just click on the green value. So now the conditional formatting is tied to that cell that sits outside the pivot. That's actually really easy. So the yellow again will be between a number and what's in F6, and that number is what's going to be in the red cell. Oops. Let me do that again. And click OK. Well, now we've got the thresholding, but the other thing we want to do now is to get rid of all the yellows. And again, just to review, I go back into Edit Rule, and then I come down here and just take the icon off the yellows so that now I'm only showing the best and the worst sales figures by day, location, and month. And this is, again, a really good tool. I can just dynamically change this on the fly. I can go back down to 800 if I want, so some more high values. But I saved this tool to last because it's really good on a pivot table, but you can apply this dynamic thresholding to any conditional formatting rule you put in your workbook. And that's about all there is for dynamic thresholding.